welcome. We are going to give it another minute or two just to get our guest speaker logged on and ready to roll. So just give us a quick moment.
Does that help?
Oh, are you there? Yeah, we can see you. Perfect. Okay, thanks, Justin. Great. So I'm going to just start by sharing my screen and doing a little bit of an introduction into the rainforest. So bear with me one moment while I do that. Okay. Oh. Can you see my presentation, or do you see? Yeah, you do. You do. Right. All right, welcome everybody. My name is Bridget Legault. I am the community manager with Rainforest Alberta down in Calgary. My colleague Amber is not with us today here, but you can reach out to her at any point at Amber Rowden on LinkedIn with Rainforest. And she usually does the tech stuff, so you can tell I'm struggling to multitask here. But welcome. If you're new to the Rainforest Alberta community, do know that you are in the right place. Anyone and everyone is welcome in the rainforest community to learn and activate innovation in the Calgary area. We welcome folks generally online from all over the world and all over the province. So there's also a Rainforest Alberta up in Edmonton. So it's kind of a different chapter, and they're run by a steering committee, a volunteer steering committee. So if you're in the Edmonton area and looking for volunteer opportunities, do reach out to Rainforest YEG is how their handle, where you can find them on all the social channels. So prior to getting started, we do want to acknowledge the traditional lands and territory that we live, work, and play upon. So feel free to read the slide and feel free to throw into the chat any of the traditional areas that you live, work, and play upon. I live and am currently located on the lands of the Tsuut'ina. I actually live on reserve land out in Redwood Meadows, and am incredibly grateful for the opportunity to be here. I shared last week that I have a mama deer and her two fawns kind of making their base in my backyard, and it has been the cutest thing. I'm really grateful for the nature that surrounds me and these lands that I live upon. So please feel free to enter that in the chat if you're somewhere else in Canada or the world. We'd love to acknowledge those territories as well. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a video about what Rainforest is all about.
What does it take to realize an idea, or for a seed to sprout? At Rainforest Alberta, we know the answer is rooted in trust. Traditionally, Albertans have cultivated their ideas in established systems. Inputs that don't fit these systems are weeded out. Opportunities for growth are missed. But now, Albertans want a dynamic landscape that can evolve organically, like a rainforest. At Rainforest Alberta, we believe a culture of trust is the fertile soil where ideas grow. Our budding innovation ecosystem is a network of relationships pulling each other up as they push forward in their own field. Trust breaks down barriers. An open, inclusive network increases collaborative innovation. Successful breakthroughs inspire new ideas. A cycle begins. Rainforest Alberta is a movement to amplify trust by cultivating honesty, inclusion, and accountability. How? Our social contract holds us accountable to demonstrate trust across the province. We meet to have honest conversations around collaboration. This leads to more inclusive spaces for everyone to fearlessly build new ideas together. By raising the standard of trust, Alberta's ideas, talent, and resources can be evergreen. Visit rainforestab.ca to sign the social contract and start growing together.
So the social contract that we reference can be found on our website. If you'd like to sign it, it's just filling out a few fields with your name and email address. It was written by a group of leaders in the tech sector a handful of years ago. Prior to creating the social contract, there were a few tech founders who had read this book here in Calgary. Well, they read the book in Calgary. The authors are from California, but the book is called Rainforest: Building the Next Silicon Valley. I don't know if they're originally from California, but anyway, the analogy is all about how Silicon Valley, what made Silicon Valley tick. And it was all about, at the time, building this trusting, collaborative, diverse ecosystem. And so while we're in no way trying to be Silicon Valley, we are trying to promote this culture of trust. And that is what we work to promote in our community. And we do that and activate that through various initiatives in the ecosystem. A lot of it gets done at the kind of ecosystem collaboration level. So Amber and I are involved with all sorts of initiatives with the broader ecosystem and representing our community. If you ever have questions about that, don't hesitate to reach out to either of us. But we also activate the community here with online and in-person events. We activate it within our digital community, Inkley, which I'll share in a moment. And also one of our other kind of staple initiatives in the ecosystem is the scorecard assessment. And this is a survey that we run every year to measure the health of the ecosystem through these 6 pillars that you see here. So we talk about these pillars making up the ecosystem and culture being the foundation and the most heavily weighted. And all of these other pillars kind of sit on top. And so if you're unfamiliar with the scorecard assessment and you want to dig into some of that data around that health, quote unquote, of Calgary's ecosystem, you can find that on our website. We're looking to measure the data across the entire province in this coming year, working together with Edmonton Rainforest to do that for both of our cities and probably provincially. So watch for details on that. We always start talking about it in the fall, and we run the survey either near the end of this year or very early in 2024 to measure 2023. And the data is used by organizations and startups all over the ecosystem to see where they can align their strategy and their daily work with kind of increasing this broader community and ecosystem for the whole city and province. So that gives you a bit of context about what Rainforest does. But again, you can always reach out for a one-on-one chat with myself or Amber if you want to learn more. To make the most out of this meetup here today, Lunch Without Lunch, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. If you're new to Rainforest, we'd love to know if you're new, so we can welcome you warmly. There's a lot of folks in the room who are often around the rainforest and would love to connect with you and share what they know about the ecosystem and help shepherd you in your journey, whether it's a startup or a career in tech, or you're just kind of curious. We do encourage you to put your camera on if you can. We know that some people might be driving, eating lunch. We don't discriminate against, whatever you're doing in the on camera. We just want to be able to get to know you a bit better, especially when we're all virtual like this. Over the summer, we are strictly virtual. So it's always nice to just put some faces to names. Please be curious. We ask that you really bring your questions to life here and that this is an engaged conversation. In a moment, we'll talk about what we're going to discuss today. And do know that every week is a very new week at the Rainforest. And so if you come one day and you think, this might not be for me, please join in another time, because every single week will be something different. We are exploring a series of topics here over the next month, and I'll touch on that in just a moment. So we do capture the chat here and we post it in our Slack channel, our Slack workspace, if you need access to those notes. Often people share information there that you want to reference back. And we do record these sessions. So please know that, and they will be posted on YouTube, our YouTube channel, Rainforest AV. So our social contract, here is a QR code where you can access that contract we spoke of earlier. Please feel free to sign. It will also give you access to our monthly newsletter Beneath the Canopy, which is a great way to stay informed with all things Rainforest. You can also check out Platform Calgary's community calendar, or there's another calendar in the ecosystem called, what's it called, everybody? In the know? Anyway, maybe someone can throw that in the chat if you know the website, but there are a plethora of activities going on in our ecosystem. August is always a little bit quieter. However, you'll see things ramping up significantly in September and then into November, which marks Calgary's Innovation Week. So lots of exciting things coming ahead. Lastly, I'll touch on Inkley. And so for those of you who don't know, this is a pilot program that we've ran through the rainforest community for the entire ecosystem provincially to access. So anyone and everyone is welcome to join this platform. Inkley is a startup, very kind of earlier stage startup. And so a lot of the features are not built yet on the platform. As it stands today, they're slowly rolling out features one at a time. So in a couple of weeks, you're going to start seeing some new functionality on Inkly. They're building out all sorts of things like being able to react to people's posts, being able to add topics to your post in Inkly. And if you're unfamiliar with Inkly, scan that code right now and get on the platform and throw your questions out to the universe. It is in its current form a question-based platform. So think about it as like the human chat GPT and the more current chat GPT. So that tacit knowledge that lives in people's heads is what you're able to access through this platform. How do you do it? You fill out a really quick profile, and then you ask a question. So if you're building a startup in Calgary and maybe you want to know how to create a go-to-market strategy for a particular product, ask that very specific question on the platform, and your question will get matched to individuals who have specific experience and knowledge with what you are asking about. So it's not like Slack where you just throw a question out to the general broad universe and hope that some spaghetti sticks to the wall. This platform will purposefully match your question to the individuals with that knowledge set. So it's very interesting, and it only works with the masses. Our pilot runs out at the end of this year, and we'd really like to keep the lights on Inkly. So if you get on there and participate, I urge and challenge you all to ask one question in the next week. And we know everyone has questions, and quite often the leaders in our ecosystem have some of the biggest burning questions that we can all learn from. So please do not be shy. You can also ask anonymously if you do not want to put your name to the question. So get on that platform, leave the QR code there for another couple seconds, and we'll wrap that up. Okay. So I'm going to stop talking here soon. I'm going to just give you a little bit of the lay of the land here for the next month or so in the rainforest. As many of you know, we've been hosting hybrid events. We've been all over the city. We've had all sorts of technical challenges, which are always fun and exciting. But for the next month and a half-ish, we are going to be solely virtual, and we are going to be exploring the technology access centers that exist in the province. So there are over 60 of these centers across Canada. We, I believe, have 8 here across Alberta, but I'll let the experts speak more to that. I was fortunate to join the Alberta Innovation Network meetings back in September, which is a culmination of all of the regional innovation networks across the province. There's 8 or 9 of them. And at that session, we were able to learn and tour some of these technology access centers. And they relate to different kind of areas of innovation. So today, I'm just going to turn it right over to our speaker. Justin, are you where? I don't see you. There you are. If you'd like to share screen, feel free to go ahead. And Justin, I'll let you introduce yourself. And if you would like to give some more context that I've missed about the TACs across the province, and then share with us the TAC that you operate out of SAIT, and we'll go from there. So turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm just gonna, sorry, I have to just give me a second to load up my particular things. And...
Sure, your audio is a bit faint too. I'm not sure if you have a microphone that's kind of far from your seat, but it is a little bit faint.
Okay, perhaps I'll just try to speak up and that works. Give me just one second, and I will load up a little bit of a presentation. And I'll be very honest with you, my intention is to keep this as open and fluid as we possibly can. So hopefully we will just simply treat it as a discussion. So the slides should hopefully serve as a little bit more of just as a guideline. So the beginning. As mentioned, thank you very much. So I'm Justin Pockar. So I was formerly a consultant, formerly with the City of Calgary, currently with SAIT in the Applied Research and Innovation Services Group, and more specifically, the Green Building Technologies Access Center. And I'm going to break it into essentially 3 little parts for us for quick discussion. An overview of who we are, of course, followed up by a little bit of kind of why we exist in a very broad sense, and a little bit of talk about the projects we're interested in right now, with a kind of a specific, I'm not going to say specific, but a focus on some of the work we're doing with First Nations groups in the province, because I think that's a very important part of where we want to go as both an institution and a society. where we start to talk about sustainability as being more than simply an aspect, but a holistic aspect, talking about all of the ESG criteria and ensuring that we incorporate that into a better and more just way of doing things. ARIS itself, as I mentioned, is the Applied Research and Innovation Services. So applied research, I should be very clear on this, is slightly different than what we would call primary research, or the research we typically associate with universities. That tends to be much more theoretical work. Applied research is usually about finding solutions to specific problems. And that means you, by definition, have to have a partner to do that, because the specificity and the context generally comes from that partner group. So a good example might be, for instance, primary research would be how one would look at optimizing energy flow through a building in general. We would be very much more interested in saying, well, how does a specific system that someone has come up with or is trying to develop behave under a given set of context? So it's very much more specific, and it's very much more related to a specific set of questions and deliverables. As I mentioned again, we actually represent green building technologies, but there are several groups that make up ARIS within the city, within SAIT, and that includes research into clean and unconventional technologies, which is essentially a lot of renewables, unmanned systems, which is our drone group, and the ability to use unmanned aerial vehicles. Serum typically focuses on advanced materials, and the innovation for information technology solutions is, of course, data management and IT. What is really important, I think, and the reason I'd like to highlight some of my other colleagues' work is they are often cross-linked. For instance, I'll give you a very simple example. We routinely are asked to look at innovative materials for insulation wall assemblies. Serum, our partners there, are very good at determining the physical properties of exactly what that means. And we would look at it and how it fits into an assembly system and how it behaves long term. And that makes a lot of mutual and
Hooray! Okay, so
one more, please, Bridget.
one more down?
Yes, please. Perfect, thank you. And I apologize, everyone, but if nothing else, this should prove our adaptability and our flexibility in most everything we do. So there, let's use that as a learning lesson. I'll just talk a bit about our mission, as essentially to lead industry in implementing green building. It's as simple as that. That's done through training, and most importantly, with respect to a technology access center, the commercialization of green building technologies. Next slide, please. And as you can imagine, we'll be going very quick. We do have a lab and research center located on the SAIT campus. It's over 10,000 square feet of equipment and technology to assess various building services. So we'll talk about that. Next slide, please. It is also a net zero energy building, so that's fairly interesting. We have three primary areas of focus. That includes energy, which is net zero energy positive designs, integrating renewable energy systems, smart sensors and building data management, and of course, energy modeling is a correlation of that. Essentially, and just as a quick reminder, if you look at the city of Calgary in particular, those are the numbers I'm most familiar with, but about 2/3 of our greenhouse gas emissions come from the buildings that we live in. That is, I'll put a bit of an asterisk behind that, because that is a rather shocking number, but it is also interesting where if we talk to most engineers, they correctly point out that buildings don't actually use energy, people in buildings use energy. We can talk a little bit about what that means in terms of an education component on the next slide, please. A secondary area of our research is the environment, and that includes everything from architectural ecology, which is the incorporation of natural materials in buildings, as well as water conservation, site design and measurement, and the inclusion of biodiversity within the built environment, which is sorely lacking. Next slide, please. And the final one is building sciences, which is essentially related primarily to the enclosure of a building. As a very little surprise to anyone on this call, I'm sure Canada is notoriously a cold environment. Despite having often 30-degree days, if you normalize a building performance over the course of a year, the vast majority of our energy actually goes to space heating still. And with improvements in building envelope and insulation and building design, you can actually reduce that number significantly, as well as providing often more comfortable and more longer lasting building envelopes and shelters. Next slide, please. The primary focus that we do is really education industry transformation, and that includes curricular development from our sister groups at SAIT, integrating students into our research projects as well as to our staff, case studies, white papers, presentations, and industry collaboration. It's probably that latter that is the most critical for a technology access center, because as I noted, one of our primary focuses as a TAC center is that notion of taking people with an idea and helping them transform that into a commercialized product, which in the building industry is phenomenally complex. And I won't bore you with the intricacies of codes and professional liabilities and the highly litigious nature of construction. I'm certainly not going to bore you with the fact that construction is the only industry that essentially has a struggle every year to improve its productivity. But suffice it to say, I've been doing this for about 25 years and have seen relatively few truly revolutionary products actually come to light in the construction industry. It is backwards. I actually, I'll give you a very, what I consider a germane analysis, or analog. In 1903, the Wright brothers flew approximately 120 feet at some 12 miles per hour in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. By 1968, they had orbited the moon. So in the space of about 65 years, we had left the bounds of Earth in the aerospace industry. And as we'll hopefully show you shortly, unfortunately, the same cannot be said for our built environment, which is a shame, because there is, from a physical properties point of view, absolutely no reason that should not be the case. It is really a question of neglect and, in a certain way, economics that are contrary to where we ought to be in the built environment. Next slide, please. That brings us to the impetus. So why do we do this? What makes me get up in the morning and come to the office? Will be perhaps a little bit more abstract here, but this is where I'd actually like to spend the bulk of our time, because this is really, to me, the guts of this. This is in the wonderful world of who, what, why, where, and when. This is the why, and you know the oldest kind of logician's trick is answer the why question, and the others just become specifics for the context. Next slide, please. Let's talk about Canada and climate impact. So as a global GHG emission source, we are relatively small. However, as I noted, our built environment, partially due to climate, partially due to economics, partially due to technology and the way we build buildings, it doesn't perform very well. And we are seeing rapid changes both in terms of how buildings deal with adaptation for a changing climate. So what does a building do? And I have to point this out because it will probably seem obvious to everyone, but it's worth noting. We have about 1.5% churn in our environment, which means we replace our buildings roughly 1.5% a year. That means the buildings that we have today are probably the buildings we'll all die with, quite frankly. And there's no other way to describe it. Your children might have a new building stock, but that's the kind of slowness to which change occurs in the built environment. We build buildings for 20, 40, 60, 80, 100-year lifespans. And that means the decisions that go into them are very long-term. That means they don't deal well with either climate adaptation, and they have not typically dealt well with climate mitigation, so the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. This is my reference to aerospace may have come a little bit earlier, but if I'm going to ask you to recall the rapid progress that the aerospace industry has made, this is a really fascinating graph to me, and I use it in almost every presentation because it is so graphic. The vertical axis on this is energy use intensity, which is essentially the normalized energy use of a building over the course of a year. That is basically a measure of how much energy it consumes, point blank. The bigger the number, the worse it is for energy consumption. The groupings are geographic areas in Canada, the far right column set being Canada as a whole, and the color coding is the year of construction of the building. And I want to point out that a building constructed before 1920 uses about 7% less energy per square meter than a building built last year. So while aerospace went from Kitty Hawk and 120 feet to orbiting the moon in 65 years, in a little over a century, we have actually demonstrated a negative 7% increase in efficiency for buildings when you actually measure consumption. There are a lot of reasons for that, changing demands, changing expectations, changing sizes. But the net result is our built environment has woefully let us down in terms of meeting any kind of greenhouse gas emissions or economic sanity with respect to utilities consumption. Next slide, please. The other thing I think we have to point out, and this is, again, a big part of the impetus that keeps us going at GBT, is dollars and intent aren't aligned very often. And I use intent as essentially a catch-all, but it is truly the hopes, dreams, utility bills, ambitions, whatever you'd like to say about buildings. And it's largely because they are economic decisions first and foremost. And that is, there's nothing wrong with that. To be quite honest, if someone's making a $100 million building, and as a consultant or former consultant, it's shocking to me how little $100 million, how little building $100 million buys you these days. It used to buy you a lot of building. It buys you a couple leasing condo towers now. That's about it. I'm not exaggerating. The dollars that go into our construction industry are immense. But what is often neglected in that dollars transition is all of the essentially non-embodied costs, and that includes things like material and carbon emissions from buildings, and moreover the persons and the time hours that go into it, the people hours that go into buildings. And I'll give you a very to me personal example from a building we're constructing in Calgary, or that got constructed in Calgary, which was the Cancer Center, which is a $2.2 billion building once you add the equipment into it. It's a very expensive undertaking. But it also employs some 2,250 full-time nurses and physicians. That $2.2 billion of capital construction cost only represents a few years of the staffing costs for it. And that never gets taken into account. So the additional cost for making a much better, healthier, cleaner building may have been $100 million, but in terms of the human expenditure and the salary cost for a structure like the Cancer Center, it's essentially trivial, which is really interesting because it's the economics no one does as a constructor typically. And I think part of what we'd like to talk about is that more holistic viewpoint towards it that says let's embody all of the aspects of a building into its value, and that includes, again, the social value, the economic value, and the environmental impacts of it. Next slide, please. Very quickly, I'd just like to walk you through a couple projects here, and I know we're close on time, and that's largely my fault. The technology's conspiring against me, but I'd just like to highlight at least a couple projects quickly. Next slide. The first one is our work we're doing on deep energy retrofits, and that means primarily high performance residential buildings being the most common type. But again, I'm going to ask you to recall that given the relatively low rate of replacement of buildings, if we're going to make a meaningful contribution to the environmental performance and hopefully the social performance of buildings in the next 10 years, you almost have to do it exclusively through retrofits. We just simply don't build enough new buildings to make a dent. So what you have to do is make the existing building stock better. And there's a lot of ways to do that. And one of them is deep energy retrofits. And so we're spending a great deal of our intellectual capital and time on how to make deep energy retrofits much more affordable and much more successful in their implementation, because they're non-trivial, and again, they represent a significant cost investment for someone. Next slide, please. Another area we're trying to focus on is the idea of resiliency. And again, if you were to ask, and this is an obvious statement again, but the most efficient building you build is the one you didn't actually have to construct, which means making sure that the existing building stock is not only upgraded, but is survivable. And that survivable means a lot of things. It means flexibility in use. It means ability to withstand climate change and different environments. It also means it's aesthetically pleasing and provides social value. And that's really important to us, because again, it underlines that holistic nature that we're trying to apply to green buildings, and the aspects of sustainability that it embodies. Next slide, please. One of the ones we're working on is, again, with some of our First Nations partners, is we are doing a cultural center in Nunavut. I'm not going to pretend to be able to say it. Cambridge Bay is where it's located. But the idea of being able to provide not only a environmentally successful building, but one that provides cultural workspace and cultural spaces and a workshop for community development, because that is important. You can imagine a place like in Nunavut, access in and out is a non-trivial problem, and that means you have to build an environment that people can thrive in the community, as well as by importing other goods and services into it. Next one, please. You can just blow through this one. I'm not going to bore you with the details. Another major project for us is the work we're doing with the Alberta Native Friendship Centers and improving, again, their cultural spaces as well as their building performance. You can imagine some of those buildings have been unfortunately neglected and were probably underfunded to begin with. And it's nice to be able to return a little bit of a product improvement model to the First Nations groups through the ANFC centers. Next slide, please. Likewise, Frog Lake is a First Nations group in north central Alberta, and they have a very ambitious plan to essentially talk about renewable energies becoming off-grid from oil and gas revenues. Mixed success, to be very honest, but very challenging. But we're doing a number of projects with them, everything from housing improvement programs to a wind turbine with battery storage, so they can use more renewable energies in their design. Next slide, please. I think that should be about it. Yes, I've left Melanie, who's technically my boss, on the contact slide here. But thank you very much, and hopefully, given our compressed time, you got a little something out of that discussion.
Great, thanks, Justin. Lots going on there. Let's head straight into questions. Who's got questions? Pete, you can go ahead and ask.
Hey, Justin, thanks for your presentation. Just my daughter's an architect and gets involved in passive home development and retrofits and that sort of stuff. Says that doing retrofit in existing buildings is extraordinarily expensive. And so that's a major hurdle. And then in the construction space, the costs of materials and upfront costs are not really factored in so much, because they just want to build as cheap as possible, because the owner becomes the maintainer and the operator of the building. So they suffer the consequence of some of those upfront design issues. Would you agree with that or not?
I would agree with that. I will also say it's interesting, because we talk about building standards, and that essentially generally devolves into a question of building codes. And it's funny, because depending on who you ask, a building code can represent a best practices guide, which it was never intended to be, by the way. its actual definition is if I did any worse of a job, it would be illegal. That is what a building code actually is. It's the minimum standard you need to assure energy efficiency and life safety standards in a building. And yet I would hazard a guess that says, particularly in the residential sector, well over 90% of our construction is just meeting that standard, the absolute bare minimum. And I think what you're alluding to, and you're correct, and you're I don't know if you're conveying that on behalf of your daughter, but as a former architect as well, it is exceedingly difficult to convince owners and quite frankly purchasers of buildings to go above a minimum standard, because it is deemed as being, it's the misconstruction of the building code as being a good building when it is basically a legal building. And you're right. And I think when you contrast that with other initiatives, and that's why institutional buildings and things like hospitals and universities are often, they will put in a separate standard for their own construction, because they've the realization that says meeting code is actually not sufficient for us in a 50, 70, 100-year lifespan building that they often construct. And so they will actually put in significantly more stringent requirements than the building code offers. And quite frankly, that is a decision that is left to the owner in a legal sense, and for the consultant team to execute on.
Thanks.
In the interest of time, I know we don't have a ton of time left here for a bit more networking. We have another presentation actually to quickly run through. But Justin, do entrepreneurs have access then to your TAC if they are exploring green construction projects? Do they have access to your research or your facilities?
Absolutely. Yes, that is, and that is, I suppose, the take-home message of this is we exist. I wanted to give you an overview of what we do to address that question, which is, it is very difficult for most people to execute on ideas in their buildings. Quite frankly, they just either legally or via a knowledge deficit have to rely on someone to build something for them. And what we strive to do is enable people who have an idea to contact us and explore various ways to bring that to fruition. And that can be through design, that can be through materials testing, that can be through even I'm not going to say the development of a business plan, but certainly the kind of refinement and the understanding of one that enables us to take those ideas and say, okay, this will have merit, or at least to be able to point out some of the challenges. Again, construction is a very litigious field, which means its ability to innovate is often challenging. And we encourage all entrepreneurs and people who have an idea to contact us, and at the very least to be able to meet with us. And there's several programs that we can talk about in greater detail, of course, but the idea of having them contact us and to be able to walk them through that, at least on a cursory level, to identify some of the challenges and opportunities is what we're here for.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks for the presentation. And it's fascinating to know we have this right here in our city, here in Calgary. And Monica introduced herself in the chat. She's with one of the other TACs that's going to be presenting later in the month. So thanks to Monica, who helped organize all of these presentations over the next month and a bit. And big thank you to you, Justin. So we're going to switch up the format a little bit. I know we usually come back at the top of the hour for community announcements, but I just want to make sure that Michelle has enough time. Michelle's here from Inception U to share a new program that several partners are delivering rather here in Calgary now. And it's really important that we're all made aware of its existence and can share it with those who are coming into our ecosystem. So Michelle, I've made you co-host if you just want to jump right in.
Awesome. Thank you, Bridget. Can you guys see my screen?
Question of the day. Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Put it in presenter mode. So, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for this chance to tell you a little bit about Inception U, and in particular, this new program that we're launching this September. September 18th is the start date. And I know many of you are probably really familiar with our full stack developer program, but this new program that we're launching in the fall is something really interesting called the Tech Adjacent Program. We are having a discovery session on August 22nd if you want more info. A little bit about Inception U. We're a design school which offers unique learning experiences for people in the ecosystem who are really looking to pivot their career. You know, tech interests them, maybe they're not sure how to get in. Inception U is the place. And some of the key elements of our approach, really proud of our adaptive and responsive curriculum. No cohort is the same as the last, always changing based on what industry is telling us. Project-based learning. It's not about studying or listening to a professor or writing exams. You work on real industry projects which pull the learning. Super proud of our great team of facilitators who work in industry. So the learning that they bring to the program is super relevant and timely, and integration of essential skills. You know, we know that the top I think it's like the top 8 or 9 skills of the future are actually these soft skills: communication, collaboration, critical thinking. We weave those into the program, all of our programs. These are the 4 pillars that our programs are built on: critical thinking, creative thinking, computational, and systems thinking. Again, you're going to be pushed and stretched in many different directions, pulled out of your comfort zone, but as we know, that's what it takes to work in tech sometimes. Project-based learning, we really like this diagram because project-based learning is not linear. It's a little bit messy sometimes. Sometimes it's chaotic. Sometimes you feel like, oh my gosh, what the heck am I getting into? But that is the way we learn. Learn by doing. We always say just show up and start. You're really going to get to work with others in these projects. So team collaboration is big. We know that's big in the tech industry anyways. You're going to work on 3 super interesting and industry related projects, which you're going to take over to your real work and life. So the Tech Adjacent Program, brand new, it's short form. So 9 to 16 weeks, depending on the pathway that the learners choose, starting September 18th. There's actually 4 pathways. And we're doing this program in collaboration with our friends at 321 Growth Academy. They're a marketing and sales startup here in Calgary who work really closely with tech startups. So the growth marketing program is one of the 9-week programs, basically learning how to be a T-shaped marketer. So, you know, design principles, marketing strategy. This is for somebody who wants to maybe work in social media, content manager, digital marketer, doing email campaigns, helping tech companies connect with their audiences. The Lean Sales Program, again, that's another 9-week program. I heard from somebody the other day who said, you know, I never thought I would be a salesperson wanting to be out there in front of people every day, but a sales career can be super rewarding, super financially rewarding, as commissions usually come on top of your salary. But we're talking about a business development role, sales role, customer success. Tech companies are telling us sales roles is one of the hardest roles that they're having to fill these days, really struggling to find great salespeople who can connect them and close the sale, if you will. Coding support, really interesting. I bet you've heard a lot about no code and low code development. So the nice thing about this program, it's one of the longer ones, 16 weeks. You don't have to become a software developer. Maybe you don't want to be a coder, but it does kind of interest you. So you'd be working alongside a software developer, perhaps an automation developer. You'd be helping them customize commercial applications for their company. Full stack design, another really interesting number of positions, a lot of companies hiring for designers, UX, so user experience, user interface, and product design. I just got an email today from Start Alberta that said, I think 58 companies are hiring. Designers was one of them. So I've got them listed here. These are all the types of jobs that companies are hiring for, and you will be able to be fit for after doing this program. We have been around since 2018. We're not new at this. Really proud of all of our cohorts, now moving into cohort 11, 300 plus learners, ranging in age from 1965. We see everybody. Really proud that 50% are new Canadians and underrepresented folks, and 40% are female learners. And we say that people, this could be you. So maybe today you're hearing this and it's not relevant to you, but I bet there's somebody you know in your network who you're thinking, oh my gosh, I think this program would be perfect for them. These are some of the companies who've hired our alumni. We have great relationships in the ecosystem. I'm sure you recognize some of these companies. And the admissions process, really it's pretty simple. We've got 40 spots available, and this program is only about half full, believe it or not. So we are looking to fill the rest of the program starting September 18th. More info at inceptionu.com. Like I say, the application process, pretty easy. You apply online. There is going to be a group interview. We've got to make sure you're a good fit for the program, and then you'll find out if you're accepted. Totally funded, you guys. I think this is the best part. Totally funded by the provincial government. We're super grateful for this grant, allowing us to offer this program. Eligibility criteria, you must be unemployed or underemployed. So that means working currently less than 20 hours per week. You must be eligible to work in Canada, not just study, but work in Canada, and 18 years of age or older. So like I said, we're having this discovery session where we're going to dive way deeper. I've just given you a real cursory look today. We'd like to invite you all, share it with a friend. I'll put the invite in the chat. And there's all of our particulars. Follow us on social media. We're always sharing lots of info. I know some of you are already super familiar with Inception U, and we'd like to welcome new people to our community. So that's it, Bridget.
Thanks, Michelle. That's awesome. Great quick rundown there. Totally jam-packed info hour. Sorts of things in. We love that diverse topics here in the rainforest. Peter says free. Yahoo. Super excited to share this with friends and family. Yeah, great program, really cool initiative. Hopefully filling some talent gaps that we face here in Canada. So thank you, Inception U, for always thinking outside the box. Thank you to Justin and SAIT and all the tax for participating in Lunch Without Lunch over the next little while. We have 3 minutes left. I don't know where the time goes. So not a ton of time left for networking. So what we'll do is if anybody wants to stick around can only really give it about kind of till 10 past 1. We'll have some breakout rooms available for people to get to know each other in there. But is there anybody else who would like to share a community announcement before we either do that or step on with our day? Monica, yeah, go ahead.
Not a community announcement, but because I also have to run, meetings every day. But I just wanted to say thank you to the Rainforest Alberta for having the tax here so that we can just share what we're doing and people can know about us, because we always encounter that as a TAC. What is a TAC? So it's just wonderful to make these connections and that you gave us this platform. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, our pleasure. Michael Kerr with Alberta Innovate said to me once, it's hard to make kind of that marketing play when you sit inside of a university. It's not like you have this sign on the highway saying, hey, build a product in Red Deer or, a green construction business through SAIT. So, so many resources that exist and are unknown in our ecosystem. If ever you have questions about wayfinding, navigating, finding some of these hidden gems, reach out to anyone here, Monica, myself, Amber, we're happy to help guide you. So any other community announcements? Thanks, Monica.
Didn't we mention the podcast?
Give her up.
Hey, everybody, please listen to the Leaders, Innovators, and Big Ideas podcast for Rainforest Alberta. We're looking for hosts, guests, and sponsors all the time. So visit libi.ca if you're interested.
Yeah, it's really fun. Peyton just hosted some episodes over the last little while. He started off his little podcasting career, so lots of fun there. Go Peyton. It's easy, it's fun, and it's a great way to kind of build your brand and become more well-known in the community if that's your goal, or just to learn about people more deeply through those podcast conversations. It's tons of fun. Okay, on the rainforest front, we'll see you virtually here next week with another TAC. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me. Also, what was I going to point to? We're starting to kind of build a list of volunteers, and we are going to have some new volunteer opportunities available here in the fall. So just putting that on your radar if you're thinking about ways to get involved as things ramp up in September, October, do reach out to myself or Amber, and we can talk to you about what some of those opportunities look like. They'll be both technical as well as kind of outreach assistance and anything else. If you want to write a blog for us, if you want to write for the newsletter, we're open to all possibilities. This is your community, so feel free to put your hand up and participate or share any initiatives you want to take off the ground as well. So thanks, everybody. I will just give it a minute to see if folks drop off, and for anyone left, they can hop into a breakout room.